All right, let's dive into mastering communication. We're going to break down the skills you think you know, things like listening and giving feedback, and uncover some really powerful techniques and even some surprising research that can totally transform how you interact with people, both at work and in your personal life.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start with the most fundamental internal skill of all, listening. Then we'll shift to how we express our own needs without pointing fingers. From there, we'll completely dismantle that classic compliment sandwich you've probably heard of. And finally, we'll get into the really juicy stuff, the critical moments when all these techniques, well, they can actually backfire.
First up, the absolute foundation of it all, active listening. Most of us think we're pretty good listeners, right? But the truth is, it's a real skill, a deliberate practice. It's the huge difference between just letting sounds hit your ears and actually truly understanding what someone is trying to tell you.
So think about it. In a conversation, are you just waiting for the other person to take a breath so you can jump in and make your point? Yeah, that's called listening to speak. Active listening is the total opposite. It's about absorbing what's being said with one goal in mind, shared understanding. It's not about winning a debate. Now, to understand why this is so dang hard, we have to look at our own biology. Get this, the human brain can process speech at an incredible 500 words per minute, just lightning fast. But, and this is the big but, the average person only speaks at about 125 words per minute. And that massive gap creates a huge physiological challenge for anyone who's just trying to pay attention. We call it the 4-to-1 gap. Your brain is literally working 4 times faster than the person's mouth is. And what does it do with all that leftover processing power? It wanders. It starts making a grocery list, thinking about that email you forgot to send. You know the drill. So the whole trick is you have to consciously use that extra brain power. The 3 R's show us exactly how. First, you comprehend. Really focus on the big picture and the little details. Second, you retain it by actively fighting that 4-to-1 gap. And third, and this is absolutely key, you respond. You prove you were listening, you paraphrase what they said, you ask smart clarifying questions, and you summarize their main points back to them.
Okay, so we've got listening down, but what about when it's our turn to talk, especially when something's wrong? When things get tense, our default setting is often blame. Well, the I message is an amazing tool designed to completely flip that script.
A you message is basically an attack. It's an accusation, and it immediately puts the other person on the defensive. But look at the I message. It's not about their mistake. It's about the impact the situation is having on you. It's a statement about your feelings, and that changes the whole dynamic. This works at the office, for sure, but it is pure gold at home. Instead of saying, you never do the dishes, try, I feel overwhelmed when I see a full sink after dinner. See the difference? So here's the recipe for a perfect I message. It's got 4 parts. 1, you state your feeling. I feel. 2, you describe the specific, observable behavior, no judgment. 3, you explain the real-world consequence. And 4, you end by extending an olive branch and offer to solve it together. This is a formula for actually resolving conflict, not just winning an argument. All right, if we can master asserting our needs, the next big hurdle is giving criticism. And this brings us to probably the most common and honestly the most flawed feedback method out there, the good old compliment sandwich. You have all seen this, right? The intention is pretty good. You start with something nice, you slip in the tough feedback, and then you end with something nice again to soften the blow. It sounds like it should work, but in reality, it almost always backfires. Here's exactly why it's so terrible. First, just basic psychology tells us that we remember the first and last things we hear, the primacy and recency effects. So people only remember the bread, the praise. The actual criticism in the middle, poof, it's gone. Even worse, over time, people learn that whenever you praise them, criticism is coming next. It becomes predictable, and it just obliterates trust. Your sincerity is shot. So what does work? Well, when researchers actually tested this, they found the most effective sequence was a total inversion of the sandwich. You lead with the corrective feedback, the hard part, and then you follow it up with a genuine positive reinforcement. The big takeaway is just to be direct, clear, and sincere. It's a proven method, especially in professional settings. But hold on, now for a huge twist. What if the very idea of using a technique is the problem, especially in the places where it matters most? Our closest, most intimate relationships. This is where the groundbreaking work of researcher Dr. John Gottman comes in, and it's going to change how you see all of this.
Gottman had this absolutely brilliant takedown of active listening, specifically when used in couples therapy. He called it Olympic-level emotional gymnastics. Because let's be real, when you are genuinely furious or deeply hurt, the very last thing your brain can do is calmly parrot back your partner's feelings. It feels fake, it feels disconnected, and in those really heated moments, it can even come across as condescending.
So, if these mechanical skills aren't the magic bullet, what is? Gottman's answer is this concept he calls meta emotion. And simply put, it just means your feelings about feelings. Do you see emotions as something to be explored and understood, or are they something messy that needs to be suppressed? That underlying philosophy is what really shapes the entire emotional culture of a relationship. He discovered that the most successful relationships tend to have what he calls an emotion coaching philosophy. They treat negative emotions not as a crisis to be solved, but as an opportunity for connection and understanding. This is the complete opposite of a dismissing approach, which just invalidates feelings, or a disapproving one, which punishes them. The real key isn't which technique you use during a fight, but the foundation of emotional acceptance you've already built long before it. And this brings us to the final and most important point. How do we put all of this together? The real skill, the true art of communication, is knowing when to use a precise technique and when to forget the rules and just focus on the raw, underlying emotional connection. It really is a delicate balance. The skills we've talked about, active listening, iMessages, they're powerful tools in your toolbox, but they are not rigid, one-size-fits-all rules. You have to read the room. Does this situation with your colleague need clear, direct correction? Or does this moment with your partner just need emotional validation? In our closest relationships, that emotional culture you've built together often matters so much more than any fancy mechanical skill.
So we're left with this fascinating paradox, aren't we? Active listening is a crucial skill for your career, but it can totally fail you at home. The iMessage can resolve a workplace conflict, but only if the emotional culture of your relationship allows for it. And it forces us to ask a really important question about our own lives. What relationship, right now, in your life, requires less focus on rigorous technique and more on creating a space for genuine, messy, underlying emotional acceptance?